Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blizzard Comedy Podcast, our special edition live version with our one and only wonderful host, the lovely Jonny Collins, who is here with me now. I don't know which side of the screen they're on yet, but
hello.
They're here.
We're all on the left, that's the point.
So this is going to be a special episode of our podcast. You can listen to you can listen to other episodes of our podcast if you look in the description down below, where Jonny has spoken to some wonderful comedians who have performed at our shows, a bit more about how they got into comedy and their journey throughout their career. And today we will be turning it around and putting the spotlight on them. So Jonny, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. I mean, warm, otherwise fine.
Yep, I am. I must apologise for how terrible I look today. I could not face putting any makeup on, and if I have my hair down, it just sticks to parts of my body I wasn't even aware I had. So I'm keeping it out of the way. So I might not look as glamorous as I do usually, but I've still got my nose ring visible. That's pretty rock and roll.
Yeah.
I don't know if the lighting condition's good enough for it to. It might just look like a big bogey. I don't know, but
I mean, I can see it. I don't know what people at home can see, but let us know in the chat if you can see Jonny's nose ring.
Yeah. Image description: I'm wearing a nose ring. And I'm looking great. So
of course, yeah, you always look great.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions for Jonny throughout the course of the interview, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we will get around to them as and when we can.
Should also clarify, I'm having my first proper drink since about April, so I may get tipsy very quickly.
I'm looking forward to this. Ranty Jonny. So, I mean, I feel like most of the people who are watching this are going to know like who you are and what you do. Mm-hmm. So I feel like for our first question, do you want to let anyone who doesn't know who you are and what you do, you are and what you do, but like for the sake of everyone else, but like where are we meeting you like now at this point in your life? Like what's special about today, Jonny, that wouldn't be the same if I asked you the same question like next week?
Okay, yeah. Well, I've no idea. I imagine probably fairly similar. Today, Jonny is a comedian, I guess, who I run Blizzard Comedy, which I assume you know, given that you're watching this. And yeah, I started in London back in 2012, before I came out as non-binary, which was a shock to none of my friends. Ever since then, I've just been getting progressively angrier at the state of the industry and indeed the world. So I've transferred that anger into something productive, I think, in Blizzard Comedy, to make comedy a more inclusive and accessible place for people. And that's basically what I do now. I don't really do any other gigs, so you're welcome.
I can't wait to get into the details of kind of everything you just said. So shall we start by going back to London?
Yes.
And your early comedy career. How did you get into stand-up?
It's difficult to know where to start, really. My first interest in stand-up as a kind of thing, and my first interest in getting involved in comedy would have been about 2008. I think I was set to go out to New Zealand the next day, and I just couldn't sleep. That's an irrelevant detail, but just so you kind of know more about the kind of person I am. And I was just Channel 4 used to just show like every Thursday. They used to just show a different stand-up special. I say different; it rotated the same 7 like every week. Yeah. And half of them were Lee Evans, who I was massively into at the time. Don't watch him so much these days, but his arena shows in particular are absolutely spectacular. So yeah, that's when I first kind of discovered stand-up, and I had an interest in doing some form of comedy since then. I didn't try stand-up for quite a few years after that. My immediate sort of attempts at comedy were little YouTube videos, the earliest of which thankfully are no longer live because they were fucking awful. It was just me and a couple of mates. Yeah, well, there was just it was just improv, but bad. And I'm aware you could say that of most improv, but like there wasn't even like the bare bone structures for it. It was like I'd have a vague concept in my head of something that would be funny, and then start filming with some friends who probably didn't want to be involved in the video. So, and then there may have been like. So some of the concepts I think had some potential, but I didn't really understand the needs of scripting and actual. I didn't have any filmmaking skills, so they weren't very good. And then, about 2011, I started learning actually how to make short comedy films. So we started doing that, which are still on YouTube under Extremely Flammable Productions YouTube channel. I can't remember the actual title of it, but I can't access it anymore, so I can't delete the videos even if I wanted to. So they're all there. But then stand-up itself, I got into because I'd met a bunch of friends. I'd met a bunch of people at the sixth form I ended up going to. Then the sixth form had its own sort of comedy club that some of the sixth formers ran. And that was just baffling to me. I didn't realize stand-up was just a thing that you could just do. You see these kind of like TV and arena comedians, and you just think that they kind of like they're just born to do that. You don't realize there's an actual progression system. So like seeing people my age sort of doing stand-up, which in hindsight wasn't good, but like actually getting up there and doing it was pretty incredible. So that kind of gave me the motivation to actually start writing jokes, because I was never the funny one in school in any capacity. I was taking what Eddie Izzard's like the kind of absurdist kind of humor, but without any context. So I just say statements that were true, and they just weren't funny at all. And then make a dick of myself in front of everyone. And then a couple of my mates at the time took me to a comedy club. Well, no, it was a mixed open mic night in Greenwich. I want to say Star and Garter it was called. I don't know if it's still there.
It rings a bell.
Yeah. I've only ever been there once in my life, but yeah, it seemed nice. I was going along to support them doing what they were doing. One of them was doing music, I think, and the other one was doing some magic with a bit of comedy. And I wasn't planning on doing anything, but I did have stuff prepared in case I kind of got the nerve once I was there. And then they just signed me up on before I could say anything, which in hindsight is a bit of a dick move. But also, if they hadn't done that, it would have taken me a lot longer to actually work up the courage to start. And I may be way more behind than I am now. So I guess I'm grateful for that in a sense. And then, like I say, I had stuff prepared that was fairly inconsequential stuff. Like I was 16 at the time as well. I shouldn't have been in the pub, but I just didn't tell anyone. But fairly inconsequential material, just about like subjects I didn't like doing at school, and the kind of thing that every like white assigned male person does when they start comedy, talk about like being a virgin, that kind of all that kind of stuff. And it went all right. Everyone was really supportive. I don't know how much of that was actually because my material was good, or if just there was a lot of positive atmosphere there. I think they just wanted to have a good time. So like I don't do any of that material anymore, thankfully. But because
I can't imagine you'd go on stage in your mid-20s and be like, "These are the subjects I hate at school."
No, I definitely wouldn't do that. I mean, I do talk about school occasionally, but mainly about being bullied and transphobia. So, which is, a bit broader than just terrible puns about maths and PE. So,
makes sense. So it went positively, and obviously you carried on with it.
Yeah.
What would you say are like the biggest like points in your journey from like that first gig to like where you are now? Did anything jump out at you being like, this is the day I realized who I was on stage?
So I actually keep a spreadsheet of all my gigs where like I don't really do much in the way of like full text summaries of them, but I do keep track of like the kind of material I'm doing and sort of self-evaluate it a little bit. So if I got that up, I could probably pinpoint things more exactly. But I think
sorry, if I told you in advance, you could have prepared.
Yeah, no, I think off the top of my head, sort of April 2013, I had a gig at TNT that, I think, I don't know what changed, but it was definitely one of the first gigs where I felt fully comfortable on stage and not just kind of like I was always fairly confident in my writing abilities, but less so in performance. I think that's one of the first gigs I had where I was like, no, this isn't because one thing I always used to get, because I started comedy underage, and like a couple of people knew this, I'd always like get that kind of like reaction from like the compere and the host of like, oh yeah, this person's only 16, 17 years old, and then just get like another massive round of applause for that, which always annoyed me at the time, because I was like, well, I don't want to be good for a 16, 17 year old. I just want to be, I don't see how that's relevant. But you know, in hindsight, I also realized that I wasn't particularly, like, I wasn't standoutish necessarily. The only reason it was impressive is because I was doing it so young. I lost track of the original question. What were we talking about?
What points stand out to you as being like the ones that defined like where you ended up? Yeah, so define where I ended up. So the first time I did a show at the Rose and Crown in Walthamstow with a bunch of my sixth form mates, that was a huge one for me, just because it was probably one of the most fun gigs I had, because it was just like, we'd collectively paid for the room. It was mostly our friends in the audience, which isn't necessarily a good setup for a gig, but it was a lot of fun to do. And it's one of the things that sort of like kind of made me feel like it was the first time probably in my life since primary school that I felt like I belonged somewhere. That was a huge moment with that, because I didn't really, like, I had friends in secondary school, but like in terms of like the kind of cliques, for want of a better words, I never really probably fit in with anywhere. I saw a post earlier about always being like the person in the friendship group who's just there and no one tells to fuck off, but they don't really engage with you. And I was always that. I was always that person. I'm not. No, it's fine. I hadn't really worked out who I was. To be fair, so was I.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, this was like the first time I felt like I actually had, like, I sort of got a sense of who I was and what I wanted to do. Other important gigs. The first one I cross-dressed was weirdly insignificant. I'd say cross-dressing because I can't think of a better term for now. But when I thought I was a man. The first, that was... weirdly, I don't think that one actually impacted my... Like, I don't think that was a particularly important gig. But it was, like, since then I've almost always, like... presented a little bit at gigs, and that I found that always gave me a bit more confidence as well, which I didn't know what to do with that information until like several years after that. And then I think after that, once I started uni, doing my big sort of final uni project, because I did that at a really, really shit time in my life. I'd gone through a pretty harsh breakup, which is cry me a river, whatever. But at the time, it really fucked me up. I was in, I was not doing good at all. And I was kind of at that point that I think a lot of comedians fall into when their mental health isn't great, of just kind of letting comedy drive them. And it was very like, really sort of chaotic energy. It was like, this is my only outlet for anything. And so comedy got a lot better then, performance-wise, but writing-wise, it kind of got a lot more bitter, a lot more cynical, and just, I don't like who I was back then. But that kind of gig that I did was very significant in that I managed to turn like a lot of negative feelings into a show that I am quite proud of. It was like one of the longest sets I'd done at the time as well. I think 20 minutes maybe, which at the time was fairly new for me. Then after that, I think doing Excess Malarkey in 2017. After my university, after that last university gig, I'd had like a couple of gigs after that I'd already booked, and then I just kind of stopped gigging for about 6 to 9 months. And then just because I wasn't really enjoying it anymore, I didn't feel like I had anything to add. So I was just like, you know what, why am I even bothering to do this? And then I was kind of sorting my life out in other ways, which I think is an important thing to do. But certainly was for me anyway. Yeah, and then, sure. Yeah. And then things were starting to get better. And then I think Roz put a message in one of the Facebook comedy forums saying that they had a dropout. Does anyone want to do it? And I was just kind of like, you know what? I've had a good day. I've not got anything else planned tonight. I might as well go and do it. And then I did it, and then it went really well. And I was like, oh, this is why I love it. And this was still pre coming out, but I felt a lot more comfortable in my skin. A lot of the material that I was doing then is still stuff that I do now, or at least sort of influences it. So I think that was the gig that got me back into comedy.
Do you think that like break kind of gave things time to like percolate a little bit in a way?
I'm not sure what that word means. I'm not going to lie.
It like kind of settle in a way, like. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I've done it a few times in my I want to say career, but I don't know if that's an accurate word. But yeah, I've had like I've never been someone who gigs regularly. Like I probably average at about maybe once every other month if you take everything into account. I've had times where I've like gigged several times a week. But compared to like most comedians my level, I really don't gig a lot. Like now I mainly just do Blizzard and then maybe like the odd other gig. But yeah, so and I always find when I'm away from stand up for like say like 6 weeks or more that it does like it's harder to get back into it, but once I do, it feels a lot better, if that makes sense.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
Is it one of those kind of sometimes you need to take a little break to remind yourself why you appreciate something?
Yeah, I think so. And just to keep it fresh in my own head, because obviously like if you don't watch a lot of comedy or you don't do comedy, it's easy to forget that, you know, people do the same bits of material. I mean, if you come to see Blizzard, you know that I do the same intro pretty much every time. But in general, like it's easy to forget that comedians will like do the same material a lot, particularly if they are sort of semi-professional. They'll be gigging around the country a lot, and I've just always struggled with like if I don't have anything new to say, I struggle to find the motivation to either book gigs or like really give it my all at gigs. Like I don't need to do like I don't need to do an entirely new set every time. I don't think that's a particularly healthy way to look at comedy. But I also, particularly if I'm doing the same gigs, I want to have something new to add. Maybe not every time, but certainly like every 4 to 6 weeks. I want to make sure that it's still fresh for me. Otherwise, I don't know. It's just not very satisfying for me.
That's fair. I feel like I might have, entirely my fault. So we've gone from London. I was going to say we might have skipped ahead, but like I told you to point out all of the major gigs. So obviously we did. We skipped all the way through. Do you want to talk about studying comedy at uni? How did that kind of change your approach at all?
Well, that's an interesting one.
I was going to say, I assume it didn't just tell you a bunch of shit you already knew. So
no, it was. I mean, the course itself was. I don't think it was like that different from the way that the uni did most of its performing arts courses, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I think for a lot of people who were just interested in doing stand-up or like a very specific type of comedy, it wasn't really what they were looking for.
Okay.
But yeah, but beyond that, like the actual experience of moving to a new city to explore a different scene, because I think I've said this before when I've been interviewing other people, but there is a little bit of a culture shift between comedy in London and comedy in Manchester. It's not massive, but particularly you notice it particularly on the open mic scene. So the open mic scene in London is massive. There's like 5 million gigs. Like everyone who's been doing open mic for more than like a year and a half runs their own gig in London, which is great because there's lots of And one thing I appreciate about starting in London is that it was very easy to get gigs if I felt like I wanted one. Whereas in Manchester, the gigs are a little bit harder to come by, but the quality is generally a bit higher, I think. So London has a huge open mic circuit.
That makes sense.
And it also has a really good professional circuit. There's not really a middle ground, whereas Manchester is all kind of integrated. Like there's a couple of open mic nights, and then you've obviously got the big comedy clubs like Comedy Storm, Frog and Bucket, which are sort of mainly professional, but do occasionally do like open mic gong show competitions, that kind of thing. But the majority of the gigs in Manchester and around the Northwest as a whole are kind of somewhere in between that. So they'll have professional acts on headlining. It'll be a paid gig, but they do also have open spots. So it's easy, so you can feasibly progress throughout the circuit. Whereas in London, I think it's very easy to get stuck in the open mic circuit if you don't travel around and sort of get those opportunities or get seen by the right people. You can just get stuck in that, which is fine. For a lot of people, that's what they want to do. They just enjoy doing it. But I think, yeah, getting to gig in Manchester definitely changed my perspective on it maybe raised my standards a bit, because the kind of gigs that I could do weren't just, open mics where everyone knew each other. Like, I had to kind of reevaluate, like, sort of like not do just very London-centric gags, which I didn't do a lot of, but like just like stuff about the tube, which I think most London comedians who go to Edinburgh will learn this lesson very quickly. The places outside of London don't want to hear about London generally.
No, I get that. Like, I get that just like going back to visit my family for a weekend, and they're like, "Oh, what have you been up to?" And I'll tell them stuff, and they'll be like, "Oh, you want to talk about London?" Like, well, that's where I live. Like, that's where my life happens. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, apart from that, the university also had really good industry connections. So, like, I got to Alex Boardman taught us a bit, and he's like he's quite a significant name on the Manchester scene. Kiri Pritchard McLean actually taught us stand up in our final year, which was awesome.
Nice.
We also got a Q&A with an agent, which is really useful. Like, you got to learn about the industry side of stuff as well. So I think doing it at university really made me. It's weird. It made me see it as more of a career, but also in doing that also made me realize that I don't think that's what I wanted to do as a career at the same time.
I get that.
Like,
there's a lot of when you're young and you're thinking about what you want to do, especially if you want to do something creative, you think about how excited you are about creating the thing. And then, like, the more you learn about an industry, you realize, like, oh, I've got to do all this grind to market myself, because it's not just my work that's going to be criticized, it's also me.
Yeah.
And then, like, I have to talk to this many people and network with these people and kiss this person's ass, because you can't do anything without a little bit of that. And it's like, it's realizing there's all that around it that makes you think, okay, how much do I really want this? And I think knowing that as part of like a university course is really important.
Yeah. And I mean, I want to, and I want to clarify, like, when I went to university, it was purely because I wanted to go to university and have that experience. And I did comedy because it's a thing that I like doing. I wasn't under the impression that I would go to uni, study comedy, and then by the time I'm finished, I'll be on Live at the Apollo, or that kind of thing. I was fully aware that that's not how things worked. But I think at the same time, it did also, like, I also didn't really understand the wider industry, because, like I say, like, the London circuit is very kind of isolated from the rest of the country. It is very regional. I feel, and like the kind of Northwest, and like maybe North as a whole, actually, but like, is all very kind of interconnected, and everyone knows each other. And it's the same with London. I imagine it's probably the same in the South and also in Scotland. But yeah, sort of like the interconnectivity of that. There's like, particularly if you're at my level and don't drive, it's very easy to just get stuck in one kind of scene. And whilst they are similar, they are also very different as well. So yeah, it was a bit of an eye-opener.
Yeah, I can believe that. So what inspires you to launch your own show?
Well, it's a thing I enjoy doing, is the main thing. Like, I'd run a handful of gigs before, a couple in London, couple in Manchester before, but they always kind of lacked direction and purpose. It was more I was running comedy nights because I wanted to run a comedy night. I wanted to book people I liked. But that's it. Like, I wasn't really offering anything like that really set us apart from any other comedy night, which is like a huge problem in London when there's so much choice. And even in Manchester, like, unless you're like already really good, which I don't know, I was decent at that point, but I wasn't fully what's the word, like, I wasn't good enough to be running my own show necessarily. So yeah, what starting Blizzard really came about as kind of working out what I wanted from a comedy night, and then doing Quantum Leopard for the first time, definitely sort of, and realizing, okay, this is really nice. I really like this atmosphere. I really like the entire ethos behind it. I'd like to create something like that in Manchester, because there wasn't really anything like that in Manchester. Like, I mean, it's a stereotype, but broadly true that like a lot of the comedy scene is generally left leaning anyway. So to an extent, in most kind of mid-level comedy nights, you get that kind of vibe, but it was none that it was really an explicit policy, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I started thinking about that, and then I started thinking about like some other problems the comedy scene had, and in Manchester in particular, accessibility for venues is pretty bad. So that became a priority. Yeah, I think those are the main things, and also just sort of getting to book like and platform people who like you don't necessarily get to see a lot of the time, and also like don't necessarily get offered a lot of stage time, and not due to their abilities, but just because they're not what like a mainstream club necessarily wants to see. And because you do get this thing when, particularly more corporation-based comedy club, like the Comedy Store, where there's like a lot of executives sort of like trying to sort of guess what comedy people want to see. And to be fair, like they probably nail it in terms of like their audiences want to see the same four bald white men with glasses who are admittedly all very good, but like
they're good in the same way.
Yeah,
yeah. Like they're all good at doing the same thing.
But I think the danger of that approach to it is that you do run a risk of getting kind of stuck in the past. Like the Comedy Store, I think only maybe last year or the year before had their first all-female lineup, and that's ridiculous. Given that like the Comedy Store in London was basically the birth of alternative comedy, the fact that it's kind of
it's taken this long.
Yeah,
like, I've had loads of all-male lineups.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if this is including the London Comedy Store. I don't know how they work. I don't know if they're actually booked by the same people or what. But certainly the Manchester one, it was the first one. And that's just ridiculous, you know?
Yeah. And so you wanted to like counteract that. You wanted a place that was explicitly kind of averse to all of these problems, going out of your way to
and also just the place for people who maybe don't have a lot of money to come and get this live entertainment as well, which I think is important, but also like be able to go and see a comedy night but not have to sacrifice quality by going to just like any open mic night, which isn't to slag off any open mic night. They're very important to the comedy ecosystem, but it's just nice to be able to offer that to people, that they can have a night of you know, good comedy with like professional headliners and acts, as well as new acts, particularly also a variety of different demographics in there, without necessarily just have the ability to go and watch them without worrying that it's going to break the bank, or without sort of going in and being like, okay, well, I can't buy any drinks, or
yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Yeah. So with like those goals in mind, obviously lockdown has hampered recent progress, but in the nearly a year that you got to do of Blizzard, how well did you feel you met kind of those goals you set for yourself?
I think we had a very good start, definitely. I feel like we hit all of the broad criteria in one way or another, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. Mm-hmm. So accessibility was always going to be an issue, just because we need to find venues, and with our budget that was difficult. I think we did the best with what we could afford. So that's stuff that I'd like to improve in the long run. In terms of diversity of booking, in some ways I think we've done really well. We're really good with gender balance and queer representation. Sort of disability and POC representation we've struggled a little bit more on, but that's stuff I'm making conscious effort to rectify. And in terms of like in terms of like getting the vibe that I wanted of like an inclusive space that's like friendly and welcoming for all, I think we nailed that. So I think in terms of like the kind of broad philosophy of it, I think we nailed it. In terms of some of the more technical sort of like I'm trying to think of a good word to describe it without just sounding like a corporate wanker. But like in terms of, I can just think of KPIs, and that's like no. I
get that.
Yeah, but like there are viable targets that we can work towards to improve it even more. So yeah, we've not finished by any means, but I think we've got a really good start, and it was always gonna we were never going to hit it perfect first time, because we need money to do that, and to get money we need investment from, and not just from our patrons, but from fans who talk us up and spread the word about us.
Yeah, and obviously, like, if you don't have like a wealthy family member with a knighthood and a string of pubs just sitting in their inheritance, you're on the back foot compared to.
Yeah, and I am advantaged in that aspect, that like I don't particularly struggle for money, so like I've been able to take some financial risk. I'm able to save up and pay all the acts out of my own pocket in months where we don't necessarily earn enough back. Like a lot of people can't necessarily do that, so I do appreciate that is a luxury I have, and I like to use that as a way to keep on putting these nights in ways that do benefit others. Because like, a lot of people are surprised when we pay them at the end of our gigs. Like, because like middle spots generally don't get paid in most places because they are the open spots on the pro nights. They're there to be like. It's just the whole payment in exposure thing. It's the way that a lot of those comedy nights work. Like you do open mic nights, you get booked for an open spot on a pro night. If they like you, they might book you for some paid work in the future. But I thought, like, I'm just going to bypass that and just, anyone who we're getting to donate their time and creativity to our night, they should get some money from that. Like, it's not a huge amount, but it's like enough that they can buy a couple of drinks, or that it could mean that they're not out of pocket by having to get a bus or whatever. So yeah, I really like that we are able to do that, and I've not had to, like, apart from like all of like the kind of support staff, like obviously me, you, Scarlett, Danny, Sam, who are all lovingly volunteering your own time to do this without financial reward, and I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, in terms of all like the acts we get on, because they're just often not financially compensated unless they're already at a certain level.
That's fair. How, like, obviously with lockdown happening, Blizzard has gone online for a bit.
Yep.
How are you feeling about that? And also, like, what made you want to take Blizzard online in the format that you did, rather than take, say, like a Twitch approach or any of the other things that other places have done? Talk us through that decision process.
So initially, I don't think I was particularly sold about, certainly not taking it online in the format that it was. I don't think that I mean, other nights proved this wrong, but I don't think that I would necessarily been able to pull off doing a stand-up night over Zoom or Twitch or whatever. So I think I was very much initially of the mind, I'm just going to like see how this develops, and then maybe work it out in the future. And then when we did our birthday live stream, I was like, I think this can work if we have it in more of a chatty kind of format. So because I think the issue with places that are just doing stand up over Zoom is that it just feels you lose a lot of the atmosphere you get at the comedy clubs. Yeah. And some places do this well, but yeah, it was definitely the kind of anxieties I had about doing it. And then why I chose the format that I did, I'd been interested in trialing some kind of panel show format for a while, because I do quite like doing improv, and that is entirely like I think it was James Ross who told me this actually, that improv is for the comedian, not for the audience. And I think there's definitely a certain amount of truth to that. It is fun to do. I like doing it. I like these little games. But also it works quite well with our general style, because I always, like the way that I write for Blizzard anyway, is always a case of looking at like what's been going on the last month and creating material from that. So I haven't had to adjust that too much. If anything, it's actually been really helpful, because I've been able to look at it from a new angle. So rather than sort of creating material in a stand-up setting about current events, I can just sort of write a series of jokes about them, which is something that I would never have considered doing in just a stand-up show, because I wouldn't be able to pull that off as a stand-up. But within this format as a host, in a panel show, that's kind of a given. So yeah, I've been interested in doing that anyway, and then after seeing how the birthday live stream went, I really liked the idea of just having it more like a kind of chat show with games, and then just like panel show just made sense from that. Yeah.
Cool. And you're planning on carrying that on even when live shows resume? Yeah,
I'd like to. Yeah. So I haven't entirely worked that out yet, but I'd certainly like to carry on doing live streams in some format or another. Because one of the good things that's come out of this is that a lot of shows have become a lot more accessible, which is obviously one of the things I want to do. And while I don't want to completely sacrifice our live shows, I think it is. I think it would be a shame to lose all the really sort of innovative ways that places have taken their comedy online. And even from just like from a cynical business perspective, you have got a much bigger reach. It's probably cheaper to put on, really, if you take into account like travel and all that as well. So just it benefits everyone to have shows like this online. While I don't think it necessarily replaces live stand-up, I do think that it should live alongside it. And I think stand-up's been very slow to adopt like more online presence anyway. Some people are really good at it, but I think that the fact that this has forced some people into doing it can only be a good thing for the industry. Like I don't think the industry is going to be the same whenever it starts to pick up back as usual, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think we can get some good things out of this. The downside is, of course, that a lot of the smaller comedy clubs are not able to continue for various financial reasons, particularly like the kind of indie, like actual owned venues that they're struggling a lot and they're getting no help. So that's not ideal.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how are you feeling about like the state of comedy as an industry right now, both with the way lockdown is impacting it and also just kind of some of the chaos that's been thrown up recently? It kind of feels like it's been jarred a little bit. Like how are you feeling about that in general, and how are you feeling about kind of like how you're going to approach it in the new normal at some point in the future?
It's a tough one, and like I don't know if I'm necessarily the best person to ask for that, because I'm not particularly, like, beyond Blizzard, I'm not particularly in touch with the industry, like, beyond the amount that I have to be in terms of, like, knowing people and all that. But I do think that, like, obviously it's in a lot of trouble due to just the fact that there's very little financial help going for a lot of artists. I think last I saw, I think it was confirmed that comedy was eligible for some of the arts fund that's getting thrown around, but I don't know like the kind of catches with that or anything. I don't know. Like I don't think anyone who calls himself a comedian or who says they run a comedy night will be able to necessarily get the help they need from that. But it's nice that there is some help available. I couldn't tell you exactly how that's working. So yeah, that's going to have a big impact. But in a way, it's kind of, it is really rebolstering the idea of the DIY comedy scene that was so prevalent in like the 80s.
Yeah, very much so.
And so it is going to be interesting how it is, because the hospitality industry is obviously kind of fucked as well. And they historically are very linked together. I think comedy can probably adapt to this better than maybe a lot of pubs can. These aren't full sentences. I'm still kind of thinking out loud with this. But yeah, it's going to be interesting.
That's okay. Yeah. I feel like that's very, very much like how things go. Like the things you think out loud are going to differ from day to day, because like every day there's, new news, there's new developments, and you don't know what's coming next. And it's really impossible to predict what's going to happen. But I think you really hit onto something with like the DIY grassroots places, because it's like they were like the scrappy underdogs who were like, you know what, I don't care, I'm just going to do things my way, and they figured out a way to get it done when the system didn't have space for them. Definitely, and I feel like those, when those kind of like, oh yeah, we've got our little pub, but we depend on alcohol sales and things, and the comedy show, which might have been the focus once upon a time, has now come in second. They're going to take a hit now that they depend on being a part of that system. And then you've got like shows like yours and other kind of very DIY ones that, you know, can still go because they're not grounded in a place, and they have that attitude of, well, it's not working for me right now, I'm going to figure out a way to make it work for me. And I think as long as you have that adaptability going forward, you've got you've got a bit of a, I don't want to say a leg up because you don't, but like you've got something driving you forward that'll give you a bit of a boost. Definitely,
but of course the other side of that is it's going to hit the working classes the hardest. And
for sure.
That's the main problem with the main worry I've got with this is if it is going to kick out and undermine a lot of the work that we and other sort of comedy like us have been doing, trying to diversify comedy, is that we might end up in a situation where like only people of a certain wealth are able to actually do this. Like I consider myself, like, I'm not personally a particularly rich person. I am on an apprentice wage right now, but I have parents who did own property in London and now don't live in London, so I've got that massive safety net of finances. So while I'm perfect, while it's all well and good me saying, you know, I think a lot of like the kind of DIY attitude is going to come back in. It's going to mostly be for like middle class white people, essentially. Is a worry I have. I don't know. It might not be. I'd like to be wrong, but I do think it's going to be a lot harder for anyone who isn't in that demographic. And it already was hard, but particularly
now. It is going to take a shock. Like you said earlier, that kind of the way things are getting shaken up could kind of give us I don't know if this is what you meant, but it's how I interpreted it.
Yeah.
Like it gives an opportunity to address issues that existed in the industry beforehand. Like what do you think are like the big things that it's important for the people who put on comedy shows, like at every level, like the promoters and the producers and the comedians and even like the bar owners who are thinking of putting on a comedy owner at some point. What do you think are the things that they should be thinking about now to address the issues within comedy as an industry?
That's a really interesting question. Yeah,
I like it when people compliment my questions.
I don't really know if I've got an answer for that.
Oh, fuck.
Well, yeah, what I can say is like I gotta say a lot of good things has come out of this, and obviously the fact that comedy is starting to unionize a bit in some capacity is really good. The fact that we finally seem to be taking some action against the long history of sexual assault and harassment within comedy is reassuring. Whether it's going to kind of fizzle out and not really change anything, I don't know. I'd like to think that this time it seems to be doing more. But yeah, I don't know. So I think ultimately we need to, like, one of the best thing that can come out of this is if it does kind of treat itself more like a community. I don't know if that makes sense, because it kind of already was, but also it was. I think a lot of people, and probably myself included, don't necessarily see it as a job. Even people who are making money from it, if that makes sense. Yeah. So
yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think a lot of. And I think what's happening now is really highlighting the fact that, you know, all avenues of your income can just go away just like that, and that was always a possibility anyway. There's other things that could cause that, but I think this has really highlighted it for a lot of people and sort of realized that, you know, we need to have more of we need to have each other's back a little bit more. I think now that with like the places that have been experimenting with online stuff and that's worked, I think that's really good. And so if stuff like this happens again, there is that alternative. I'm kind of completely trailing off, to be honest. So I've completely.
That's okay.
Missed the point of the question.
No, I liked where your thought process went. it made sense to me.
Cool.
So if just hypothetically, like the world came to its senses and everything went as perfectly well as coming out of lockdown and rebuilding like a safer, fairer society, if it went as perfectly as it could possibly go, like what do you picture comedy as an industry being like?
Oh, I've no idea. I mean, I can say what I want it to be like, which is just Blizzard but bigger.
Every show is Blizzard.
But like more of that. So I think the big things are just that all the breakthroughs we've had with online shows carry on in some form or another, whether that's just starting to live stream live shows more often, which I get is a little bit more complicated than sort of doing stream gigs from your own sofa, because like you have to get permission from everyone, and like there's always that kind of thing of like particularly people who are like previewing shows and stuff, whether they want that material out there on the internet that early necessarily. So so I don't know specifically how that'll work, but I hope that will the ripples of that will be seen throughout comedy clubs for the foreseeable future. I'd like there to be more of a culture of promoters who are statistically almost entirely white men. I think I can think of maybe 1-2 promoters who aren't men off the top of my head. I'm sure there's more than that, but I think we get into a situation where they kind of start listening and addressing abuse and sexual assaults happening in their comedy nights and not just kind of brushing it off. I don't know how that's going to be enforced, but I think the fact that it is getting called out a lot more often, which I think this is a good, like, people will slag off cancel culture, and I still maintain that it's mostly bullshit, but I think like ultimately it's a good thing because people are being held accountable for their actions, and promoters who like were just kind of overlooking that, or in worst case scenario actively participating and enabling it, are going to have a much harder job. And I think, and hopefully that will open the way for people who aren't pricks in that way. But also equally, there's some big names who, like, it's pretty much an open secret, who like have a huge history of sexually assaulting newer acts, who are still with their agencies. Their agents know all of these allegations, and it's just been really hushed up. So whether that actually changes or not, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
it's really depressing.
Tricky thing to address.
Yeah.
Like, it's
ultimately like the first step is getting more women involved in the kind of the promoter side of these things and the venue owners. And I don't know specifically how we do that, but the fact that it is mostly a boys' club is definitely creating and you see this in every industry, every business, every kind of company that's predominantly male, which is pretty much all of them. Like you get the same kind of thing happening of just like whenever like there's allegations, like they'll either be completely ignored, the person making the allegations might be dropped for another reason, but definitely because of that, or maybe like they'll just move the abuser to another department, possibly even giving them a pay rise. So this is definitely a thing we need to tackle, and the first step of that is like not like addressing the gender balance in that.
That is a very fair point.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, what do you think like people need to do to do that? But you've kind of answered that question already. So
yeah, I mean, obviously there is more to it than that. But having more women in these positions can only be a good thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense.
I just realised I've gone really dark. I don't know what to do. A bit more light.
I can still see you clearly if that helps.
Oh, cool. That's fine. Well, I think I'm a bit lighter now anyway. Yep. Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh no! Well, fuck it. Fuck it. So either this is glaring at it, or
we've been talking for. We've been talking for like nearly an hour anyway, so I think that's usually as long as the shows go.
Yeah.
So we'll probably be wrapping up soon.
Sure.
So the question you usually finish on, I'm turning back on you. What is the one bit of advice that has stuck with you the most throughout your comedy career?
There's a lot I could go for here. I think what I'll go for, I think, it's the sort of broadest possible bit of advice I received is, what's his name? We had someone do like a kind of TED Talk kind of thing at university. He's an American comedian. He worked with like Jim Carrey, done stuff before. I want something Molyneux. I can't remember his first name. I want to say Chris, but that might be something completely different. I don't know. But yeah, it's like the one, like he gave us a lot of sort of great tips and advice and philosophies behind comedy. But like the one thing that's always really stuck with me is that everything you learn and every rule of comedy, and you can apply this to a lot of creative arts, I think, every rule has an asterisk next to it. So like you can be taught the rules, you can have a good understanding of how to formulate material and how to approach comedy, but they're not definitive. Like you can bend them and you can make your own thing, sort of bypassing them. And that's always been the thing that stuck with me. Just because, you can, like, there's no. It sounds cliche, because there is a wrong way to do comedy, because Comedy Unleashed do it. But there's like the kind of rigid things, like rules of comedy, can be subverted and completely bypassed, and you can still create something new out of that. That like no one else has done before, or at least not many people have done before, and then that can change the entire kind of landscape of it and influence the things that are being taught to future generations. And I really like that.
I really like that. That's very nice. Yep. And it would be a wonderful point to end on if we hadn't had a question come through.
Oh, fantastic. What's the question?
So the question from Samantha Lorien.
Hello, Samantha Lorien.
What's it like working with super talented producer and broadcast engineer extraordinaire Samantha Lorien, brackets, and the others, I guess?
It's absolutely fucking wonderful. Our live streams would not be anywhere near as pretty and fancy if we didn't have Samantha on board with this. Like we probably could have done it, but they would have been a lot more boring. And I think our first live stream really demonstrates that.
Definitely, like
not that it was bad, but it's only gotten better since Samantha's got involved.
Yeah, and like I can tell you, I have attempted to use OBS, and while I can use the software perfectly well, my internet connection is not good enough that it will stream, it will broadcast, just drops every frame, so it would not even be worth me attempting to do it. That's just how bad it is on my laptop. Sam is absolutely a champion.
You are very much an asset to
good internet.
to comedy. And it's even weirder that you're still a Patreon, given how much you contribute to our actual shows now as well. So it's like you're paying to work for us. I'm enjoying it.
So do you want to tell everyone, I mean, there are links in the description to where they can follow Blizzard and where people can follow you.
Yep.
Do you want to tell everyone what you're up to and where they can find you and what they can watch you doing?
Oh, yeah, sure. So obviously, like most of the content I'm doing now is going on this channel. So after this stream, I'll be editing together the final episode of Archives, which will entirely be content from me. I don't know how long it's going to be yet, but I've done the initial cuts and I've got like about an hour and 12 minutes of material. And I feel like that's probably too much to inflict on you. So I'll probably cut it down a little bit from there. But yeah, that will be up soon. Also, there's all our podcasts, which are on our Anchor site. And I think also on Spotify and other podcasty things. I don't know how it works. I'd let Kirsty deal with that. You can also, I do have my own YouTube channel that I believe, I think it's in the YouTube description. If not, it's It's Golf Jesus 666, which is a terrible name. I need to change it, but I haven't got around to doing it yet. I probably will at some point. But yeah, I made that when I was like 15, 16, and I just haven't changed it since then. I also do some gaming videos over on BC Play, which is more for my own amusement than anyone else's, really. And then, yeah, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. And then, and the next Broadcast Avalanche episode will be on the 31st of August. We have a really fun lineup for that. And although the news is definitely depressing, there's been some quite nice gems I've found over the past couple of weeks already that I think will sit really nicely. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one. And I'll be in a new flat by then. So I will have different scenery, and that will be exciting to long-time viewers of my content.
Cool. Is there anything else you would like to leave us with?
No, not really. I mean, that's pretty much everything. Trans women are women. J.K. Rowling's a TERF.
Cool. I like that. That's a really good note to end on. Trans women, and J.K. Rowling's a TERF. And with that,
is cute.
Thank you everyone for watching.